it working now?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Maybe.
Good morning. Happy Sunday after Thanksgiving. So we, last week, for those of you that remember, we started the book of Proverbs. We kind of went over the introduction and the outline. And this week we're going to start the first section of the text. As we talked about after the intro, the first major section is on wisdom and folly. So this will be wisdom and folly part one. There's going to be a lot of different parts, but we can talk about this or call this wisdom's admonition. Wisdom's admonition, and it's from what we'll talk about today is in Proverbs 1, verses 8 until the end of the chapter, so verse 33. In this section, there's kind of two stories that are being told, all with the same theme on wisdom and admonishing or pushing people to listen to wisdom. So we'll go through and read that. But let's start by reading verses 8 through 33. So just everybody take 2 verses at a time, and then we'll read the rest of the chapter.
My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck.
John.
For they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head.
Verse 10, she just read 8 and 9, so do 10 and 11.
My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, Come with us, let us lay wait for blood. Let us look privately for the innocent without cause.
Let us swallow them up alive as the grape, and whole as those that go down into the pit. We shall find all precious substance, we shall fill our house with spoil.
Cast in thy lot among us, let us all have one purse. My son, walk not thou in the way with them, refrain thy foot from their path.
For their feet run to evil, and make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird.
And they lay wait for their own blood, they look privately for their own lives. So are the ways of every one that is greedy of gain, which taketh away the life of the owners thereof.
Yeah. 20.
Wisdom cries without, she uttereth her voice in the streets. She cried from the chief place of concourse. In the openings of the gates in the city she uttered her words, saying,
How long, ye simple ones, will you love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. Turn you at my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit unto you. I will make known my words unto you.
Because I have called, and ye refused, I have stretched out my hand, and no man regarded. But ye have set at naught all my counsel, and would none of my reproof.
I also will laugh at your calamity, and will mock when your fear cometh. When your fear cometh as desolation, and your destruction cometh as a whirlwind, when distress and anguish cometh upon you.
Then shall they call upon me, but I will not answer. They shall seek me early, but they shall not find me. For they that hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord.
They would none of my counsel, they despised all my reproof. Therefore shall they eat of the fruit of their own way, and be filled with their own devices.
For the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of fools shall destroy them. But whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil.
So all the verses that we just read, they're all about wisdom, and I don't know if you guys picked up on it, but it's kind of like 2 separate stories that are being told. So the first story is in verses 8 through 19, and then the second story being verses 20 to 33. So we'll break it down. We'll talk about the 2 stories separately. Hey, Sam. We'll talk about the 2 stories separately, and then we'll jump into some of those meanings. So the first story that we start off with, it begins in verses 8 and 9. We're in Proverbs chapter 1. Verses 8 and 9. My son, and Solomon is talking, he addresses my son throughout the book of Proverbs about 15 times. And, we can think about that more broadly than his biological son, thinking about the nation of Israel. We can apply it to ourselves as well, thinking of him almost as a father figure or as a parental figure talking to you, our God, the Lord Jesus Christ. So my son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. For they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck. The Bible is filled with people who were heavily influenced by godly mothers or parents or guardians. When we think about godly mothers in the Bible and men that were influenced by them, we think of Moses, we can think of Samuel, Timothy, and others. We can even think in contemporary history like Sir Isaac Newton and others that were influenced by godly parents. And what this is saying in verses 8 and 9, we see in 9, for they shall be an ornament of grace. It's not a terminology or a turn of phrase that we use very often anymore, but the idea of verses 8 and 9 is that obedience to God-honoring parents can bring honor and moral beauty to a wise child. And a wise child would be one that listens to the advice and the instruction of a godly parent, a God-honoring parent. So, again, the reason why we focus on a God-honoring parent, if your mom or dad was a pirate and they were telling you to loot and plunder and kill and do all those things, it's probably not the best for you to, want to do those things. But if you have a parent, man, I didn't even get a smirk. It's early in the morning. What's up, John?
But you should still respect your parents.
You should always respect your parents, right? The fifth commandment, honor thy father and thy mother. But where their instruction deviates from what God wants you to do, respectfully, you need to say, hey, I need to follow the Lord. But yes, you're right. We always should be respectful of our parents. Even when you're old and on your own, it's still important to be respectful of your parents, right? No matter how old you are. So, obeying your parents and the importance of having a godly parent and how that can influence the direction of your life. All right, so that's sort of the introduction that we get to this first story. Verses 10 through 18 is where the story really starts. So he says, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. And then here comes the story. So think about in verse 10, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. We oftentimes, when we see, whether it's in school or on the news, or you hear about somebody that you haven't spoken to or seen in a long time, and they ended up in jail, or their life is just a wreck, you say, man, how did that happen? How did Susie or Bobby, how did they end up in prison after being arrested for X, Y, or Z? Whatever the calamity is, how did that happen? And very often we say, well, it all started when they started hanging out with the wrong people. It all started out because they got in with the wrong crowd. And what this verse 10 is admonishing us to do is we have to be ready. You have to be ready to say no 1,000 times a week if that's what it takes. No matter how many times somebody entices you to do the wrong thing, you have to be ready to say no. And that's difficult because lots of times the people that are asking you to do the wrong thing, they look like they're the cool kids at school, or they look like they're having all the fun around the neighborhood or at work. Those are the ones that are always going to parties after work, and that stuff looks fun. And you want to take part. You don't want to be left out. You want to be included. It's natural to want to be included and have a group of friends. But if they're doing the wrong things, verse 10 is telling us we need to be ready to say no over and over and over again. Saying no once isn't good enough if they ask twice. Because that second time, if you say yes, you're already going down the wrong path. So we need to be ready to say no. Verse 11, if they say, come with us, let us wait for blood, let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause. I know this is a little far-fetched for most of us at this table, talking about robbing somebody and being ready to kill that person for their goods. That's probably a little far-fetched. I don't think I'm looking at any stone-cold killers. So we'll talk about how we can apply this more broadly. But it's also important to remember, guys, that there are a lot of things in life that you can be sitting here today and you could say, I would never do that. Be very careful about saying you would never do something. Because given the right circumstances, and if we have said no to the Holy Spirit enough and we don't have that conviction, given the right circumstances, Our hearts are deceitful and desperately wicked. You're capable of doing a lot of things that you think you could never do. But let's continue with this story. So verse 11, we see that a teen, I'm in the midst of teens, or those that are close to be teens. A teen is honored by this to be invited. He feels, or she feels honored to be invited by a tough gang, to join them. And they tell him, hey, we'll kill, but only if it's necessary. And you're like, oh, wow, that's exciting. You know, they've got this big group of strong people. They're going to go out and they're going to commit a robbery. And you know what? They're strong enough where if they have to kill, they'll do that. Wow, that sounds wild. Again, I know that may not sound realistic to you guys right now, but let's continue with the story and see how we can apply it a little more broadly. Verses 12 through 14, we've already read, but let us swallow them up alive as the grave and whole as those that go down into the pit. We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our house with spoil. Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse. So what these verses are saying is, hey, we know that you've kind of lived a sheltered and boring life. So why don't you leave that behind, come with us, and check this out. If you come with us, it's going to be an easy job. This guy's got a lot of money. He's traveling with only 1 or 2 guards. There's 20 of us. We're going to rob him. We're going to kill him. We're going to bury them in a shallow grave. Nobody's ever going to find out. And there is so much gold and jewels there that you're going to be able to fill your house. You're going to get rich overnight, and it's going to be easy. It's going to be easy. Nobody's going to know what you did. All that's going to happen is that you're going to be rich. Sounds pretty good, right? Hey, Sam, you're not going to get in trouble, and by tomorrow morning, you're going to be one of the richest men in town. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? And for somebody who doesn't have a moral compass, remember back when we started this story, talking about God honoring parents and listening to them, somebody who doesn't have that person saying, hey, don't listen to these people, do the right thing, that sounds pretty good. It's a win-win, you can't lose, and you're going to be rich. That sounds pretty good. Verses 15 and 16, my son, this is again Solomon talking, walk not thou in the way with them, refrain thy foot from their path, for their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood. In verses 15 and 16, you've got that wise voice, that parent, that guardian saying, don't do it. Your friends told you you can't lose. I'm telling you, you can't win. This isn't the first or the last time that they're going to ask you to do something like this. Eventually, if not this time, eventually they will lose. There aren't many bank robbers today or in the past that never got caught, right? All those stories about the wild, wild west that we heard about, and, you know, robbing trains and banks and things like that. Eventually, they get caught. And that's if they're lucky, right? They only get caught if they're lucky, if they don't end up dead, which a lot of them did. And even if you don't get caught, let's say you do get away with it, the guilt that you're going to have to live with, the mental consequences, your inability to have a normal relationship, your desire to continue to do more so you can gain that feeling of excitement again, to feel whole. When do you have enough money? When are you going to be able to stop? You're not going to be able to. There's more consequences than just getting caught. And you have this godly influence, this parent telling you, this guardian telling you, refrain from the path. Don't go down that path. Don't even take one step down that path. Don't say yes one time, even for 1 second. You need to say no from the get-go. And it's going to be hard because they're telling you that it's an easy score and you're going to get rich quick. It's going to be fun. But don't take one step down that path. Verses 17 and 18, this is where Solomon is getting kind of funny here. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird, and they lay wait for their own blood. They lurk privily for their own lives. What Solomon is saying here in verses 17 and 18 is that is a bird a very smart creature? Most birds. There's some that are pretty good at hunting, right?
Yeah.
But
Most of their
Just
average.
survival.
yeah, okay. But he's saying even the dumb birds, when they see a net, they fly away from it. And they don't, even dumb birds don't go towards the nets that they can see. He's saying that these people that are talking about robbing and killing and getting rich quick overnight, they're not even as smart as those dumb birds. They are building their own net and then flying into it. Even a bird avoids a net, but these people have made their own nets and are about to fly into it. And they're about to fly into it. We see in the last verse, so are the ways of everyone that is greedy of gain, which taketh away the life of the owners thereof. And this is the moral lesson. Get rich quick schemes, and this is how we can apply it more broadly, pay with their own lives. The people that try to perpetuate those sorts of things. If you're greedy for gain, you'll ultimately pay with your own life. So we can think about modern day get rich quick things. You got Ponzi schemes. Bernie Madoff, he's in jail for a very long time for stealing millions and millions and millions of dollars. That person that comes up, he said, "Hey, you want to make a quick 10,000? It's easy. All I need for you is to give me $500, guaranteed. You're going to get 10,000 by the end of the week." Chances are you're not going to see that money again. And what this is saying is that morally, people that are just looking for the easy thing to get rich quick, it's dishonest, generally speaking, and your lust for wealth, for your greed to have more, eventually it's going to consume you. And if it doesn't physically kill you, it's going to consume you to the point where you're willing to do unscrupulous, dishonest, wrong things. And as we talked about earlier, you're going to pay with more than just the lawful outcomes, but your mental well-being, your spiritual well-being, you're going to pay with those things. So the verses 8 through 19, you have to be ready to say no. Having that godly influence. Oh, you all have a parent or a guardian that is a godly influence on you. But let's say we have somebody that joins this class in the future that doesn't have a good home life, that doesn't have somebody at home that's encouraging them. Okay, that's fine. Find that godly influence. Somebody in this church, I'll tell you, should come alongside that person voluntarily, even if they're not asking for it, should come alongside that person and be that godly influence to help and encourage them to say no to these wrong influences. All right, that's story number 1. We're going to move on to the second story, to that second story in verses 20 through 33. In this one, we see wisdom. Wisdom here, anybody notice something about all the times we see wisdom?
Personified.
It's personified, yeah, very good personification. What does that mean? Can you explain it to those of us who don't understand?
It means